Hello all, welcome back to the Geezerology Roundtable. We have our usual cast of characters here on the Super Bowl Sunday. Today, we're going to get back to Creedence Clearwater Revival after we did the Creedence Clearwater Revival debut a few weeks ago. Today, we're going to look at the second album, Bayou Country. This is the first of 3 LPs that the band released in 1969. This one hit stores on January the 5th. And the album was produced by John Fogerty. And it featured the hit single Proud Mary, which was released by Fantasy Records on the same day, January 5th, as the album came out. And Proud Mary climbed pretty quickly to number 2 on the charts. It never did get quite to the top, but it hit number 2, and it was a very successful single. And that was pretty much probably the thing that turned Creedence Clearwater Revival into superstars. It was their second hit single, but it was their first really monster one. But anyway, I know Bob has been a big fan of Creedence Clearwater Revival for quite some time. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob to kick us off today. Take it over, Bobby.
All right, thank you, Scotty. Yeah, Scott's correct. I'm a big Creedence fan. Love their music. Love John Fogerty's solo stuff too. This checks all of my boxes. It's straight ahead, guitar-driven rock and roll, straight ahead songs, and I'm not a complex guy, so yeah, it checks those boxes. This is Creedence's second album. Shows John Fogerty's continued involvement as a songwriter, producer, creator. Scott mentioned Proud Mary. Back in the day, you could not escape that song. It was everywhere. And if you were a bar band back then, there was like an unwritten law that song had to be on your set list. And then the song even gained more popularity when Ike and Tina Turner covered it. And if you're a certain age, who can forget Tina gyrating to that song on stage? And then there was another performer, Solomon Burke. He had something of a hit with a cover of it. So Proud Mary was just everywhere. Born in the Bayou is another significant song. Born in
the Bayou was the B-side to Proud Mary, right. Actually. Yeah.
And it's also, Creedence. And when we say Creedence, we're really talking probably John Fogerty more than anything. Went all in on the Southern mystique. And so there's something kind of otherworldly about 4 guys from San Francisco immersing themselves into the Southern swamp culture. I read some stuff with Fogerty where he talked about inspiration for some of the songs on this. And like Born on the Bayou, he actually got inspired to do that song after watching a movie that was set in the South called Swamp Fever, I think is what it was called, And then another interview I read, he said a lot of the songs that he wrote at this time, he's just sitting in his cheap apartment, staring at a blank wall and just trying to let his mind go empty for inspiration. Every song on the album is written by Fogerty, except for one, which is a cover of Little Richard's Good Golly Miss Molly. 2 of the songs on here are fairly lengthy. Graveyard Train clocks in at 8 minutes and 37 seconds, and then Keep on Shuglin' at 7:39. And as I think it's fair to say that as Creedence progressed, their songs got tighter and tighter. And but this is an era where they're still throwing on some long jam type songs. And I think from what I understand of Fogerty, he wasn't really into jam type music necessarily, but recognized that at this time and place, doing these kind of songs helped legitimatize you as a band and as a musician. So, we have a couple long songs on here, but further into their catalog, the songs get tighter and shorter. And I think Fogerty would have made a great journalist. He wrote songs that had a distinct beginning, middle, and an end. He said what he had to say and he got out, just like a news story. So I admire his songwriting. I admire how he could be succinct about it. I think there's some good stuff on this. Born on the Bayou Proud Mary, obviously, two great songs. Keep on Chugolin became a crowd favorite in their concerts. Some of it's a little, yeah, there's not a bad song on here, but obviously some are better than others. He does a great cover of Good Golly Miss Molly, changed up the lyrics a little bit. We're not seeing too terribly much of Fogerty's social consciousness here yet. The political stuff starts coming a little later. There's a little bit stuff here more that's a little bit autobiographical still, and he's dealing into some personal things. He's dipped his toes into the blues. He's dipped his toes into that Southern culture thing, which is going to, dominate their music from here on out. And so there's not a lot that I can say about Creedence's music that isn't already out there, that hasn't been discussed for decades and decades. I like it. If you're not familiar with Creedence, and I'm not certain how you could not be familiar with them, but if you're a younger person, I would recommend checking this out. It's a distinct music of its time. And some of these songs, they do suffer from overexposure, like so many other great classical rock songs. You can't listen to classic rock radio without hearing Creedence and Fogerty stuff, but I think it's worth checking out. And Fogerty just kept getting better and better as time went on from here. So.
Have you been listening to this album since you were a kid?
I
assume you are. So this isn't anything new to you. This is
nothing new to me. No.
This is very, very deep in your soul. Right?
Very deep in my soul. I have every Creedence album. I've got virtually all of Fogerty's solo stuff. There was a couple things out there, that I missed.
See, I knew when you and I were in college together and roommates together for a few years. But that was during the time when Fogerty was in a solo career. I knew you were a big fan of a couple of Fogerty solo records, but you're also of the Creedence back in the day.
Oh yeah, and after Creedence broke up, Fogerty kind of went into a hiatus where he didn't do much. The first thing that he did after Creedence, he did a solo album where he played all of the instruments, and he didn't actually call it the Fogerty album. He called it the Blue Ridge Rangers, but the Blue Ridge Rangers was Fogerty doing everything. And if you look at the album cover,
so was Creedence. So was Creedence.
There's like 4 or 5 people on the album cover in solo work.
Yeah.
So it make it look like a band, but they're all photos of Fogerty.
Yeah.
And it was okay, but he didn't produce some minor hits, and so he didn't do anything spectacular for a while until we get to Centerfold. Where he
Centerfield.
Centerfield. Oh, my goodness.
That's very different. Never mind.
You can see where my mind is, okay? My wife's been gone for a week. You know where my mind is.
Why you go from one American classic to the other?
They were saying about a baseball team, not a porn magazine.
Center field, okay. All right, so then he revitalized his career, but no, I've been a Creedence fan since day one.
Yeah. Dee, how far do you go back? I know, like for me, I back in these days when this came out, I knew the Creedence songs that played on KXOK radio, but that was about as far as I went with it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, with all their songs that made the top 40, the top 20, I heard them, I liked them. I never disliked Creedence. I could say I was a casual fan, not an ardent fan, because I didn't, go out and purchase any of their music. Of course, Proud Mary, that's the first thing, and I really like the song. I mean, what can you say about it? It's iconic. It's part of that era's tapestry, so to speak. Yeah. And I did hear it. I don't think it was released on AM radio, but Good Golly Miss Molly is really a cooker. I think they took, Little Richard is no slouch either, but their version of it is even, it rocks harder. And but I don't think I really got into Creedence till somebody else, probably not till Cosmos Factory in a serious way. But I mean, my gosh, Proud Mary, I had checked that, there's been over 100 different artists that have recorded Proud Mary. Everybody from Elvis, Conway Twitty, Beyonce, and yes, Leonard Nimoy. I'm familiar. I haven't heard his version. But what can you say about it? And then, Proud Mary, the reworking that when Ike and Tina did that catapulted them to superstardom. And I read too, John Fogerty, he said, thank you, beautiful Tina, for your version of Proud Mary. And the royalties kept coming in, of course. The other tunes on here that I listened, Penthouse Pauper, straight ahead blues rock, nice little tune. The one with the Graveyard Train, I think I like the tune, but I think they could have shortened it by about 2 minutes. It definitely, if you love blues, check it out. It doesn't get much more straight ahead blues. So blues rock. And
I have never heard this album before this week. I'll listen to it a few times. And as I said when we were talking about the debut album, it's like, I think one of the later Creedence albums I listened to a few times when I was a kid, but other than that, I just know the songs that you hear on the radio. So I'm kind of here. I'm playing along with this. We're going to go through their discography kind of chronologically, and I'm going to go to the approach that, okay, I'm listening to all this for the first time, basically, as a package anyway, as an album package. And so I want to trace the Creedence story through their music, that I'm going through for the first time, and try to and figure out the development and how all this happened. My first response to this is that obviously they've always been Creedence has always been in the public eye linked with the swamps of Louisiana, and we all know that was that they're from California, and that was all a made-up thing. It never was really happened. So just before I get into my full impressions of what's going on here with the whole album and everything, but I had the thought, to me, this sounds just like a straight out. They're just playing the blues. They're just getting in a blues groove, and they're just playing some their take on the blues, sort of rock and blues thing. And I'm wondering if this whole thing with the swamps of Louisiana and and all that, did that all come about just because of the title and the lyrics of the song "Born in the Bayou" and probably the title of the album "Bayou Country"? Is that how this became known as swamp rock and Louisiana swamp music? Because to me, it's just pretty much straight out blues rock. I mean, what makes it swamp rock? I don't know. And I just wonder if that's just because of the title of the song, the title of the album, and the lyrics of the song. That just kind of put them in that genre. I don't know if anybody has any insight into that. They'll let me know. But my impression, listening to this for the first time, is, like I say, it's just straight out John Fogerty playing the blues. He gets his bandmates, his older brother Tom, Doug Clifford, and Stu Cook. They just lay down a blues groove, and this is John Fogerty, putting on his old man blues voice and singing his heart out on his stuff. getting in some pretty heavy blues lead guitar licks, and that's pretty much what this is. There's there's not a lot of variety here. I mean, from the first note of Born in the Bayou to the last note of Keep on Chugling, it's just a long blues workout. It's all good. I mean, it's all good, but it's in a groove. It's a great little groove, and you get in that groove and you stay there for about 40 minutes, however long this is. They change a few things up between songs, but pretty much from start to finish, you're just in a blues groove. And okay, and now looking at the evolution of Creedence's music up to this point, this to me, it doesn't sound a whole lot different. I went back and listened to, after I listened to this a couple of 3 times this week, I went back and listened to the debut just to compare. To me, there's not a whole lot of difference between the first album and this album. It's just that this album is more refined than the first album was. And the other big difference that I noticed here, the first album, which was produced mostly by Saul Zaentz, it was actually credited to both Saul Zaentz and John Fogerty as producers, but it was probably most of it was handled by Saul Zaentz, who was the guy who got them started, and it was their manager and everything. But the biggest difference between the first album and this album, to me, is that where the first album was about 75% John Fogerty, this is 100% John Fogerty. And that's the only big difference, because there aren't any background vocals to speak of on this album, where there were on the first album, where the other band members did some background vocals in a couple of spots. The first album, especially through the song Susie Q, which was a pretty long band, it was kind of a jam. Most of Susie Q that got edited down to a single, but it was a pretty good band blues workout. But you heard a lot more of I don't remember which one's a drummer. Stu Cook was a drummer. Doug Clifford was a drummer.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But in that first album, a few times you would hear Doug Clifford do a few drum fills, and maybe a short little solo or something. Stu Cook on the bass bounced around a little bit more in that first album than he does on this one. And also, you could hear Tom Fogerty's rhythm guitar a little bit more. He spread out a little bit more in that first album. But this one, John Fogerty took over the reins of this band, took over the writing of this thing, took over the production of this thing. And this was a John Fogerty album. No question about it. The only thing that Tom Fogerty, Stu Cook, and Doug Clifford do, they set a groove for Fogerty to play on top of, and that's to me the big difference between that first album and the second album. First album, there was a little, you could hear a little more of the other guy's personality coming through the music than you can here. And also from reading about this record, this is really, John Fogerty took over complete control of the band at this point, early in their recording career. At this point, this was John Fogerty, and this is where the dissension started within the band, because apparently the other guys, were resentful of this. Were resentful of the fact that all of a sudden Fogerty became the guy, and they were going to do it his way, come hell or high water, and nobody else had a say in it anymore. And it wasn't a band anymore. It was a John Fogerty solo project, as I assume going forward. And we'll learn this as we go along, and I'll learn along with our uninitiated audience members here. But I assume as we go along that this is probably going to be the case for the next 3 or 4 albums, at least the next 2 albums that were released in 1969, because they just cranked them out in this year, and I assume that's because John Fogerty was just just put his head down and went to work.
Yeah.
For this year and the next couple of years, and I would imagine that the more this went on, and honestly, again, looking forward here, Creedence Clearwater Revival's career only lasted for a couple of years. 3 albums in '69, and then I think a couple albums in '70, and maybe one more, maybe the last one was in '71. But it was no more than 2 years in this band together. And by the time this, during the course of this 2 years, I could see where this resentment among the band members just festered and festered and festered until it exploded. Basically 2 years after Green River came out, right? That's just my impression as somebody who never knew it, who was never really known too much about Creedence Clearwater Revival, except for the songs that we heard on the radio, which I was, I just like everybody else, I was real familiar with those songs. I was real familiar with the song Proud Mary. And there are a couple of songs on this album that I knew pretty well. Born in the Bayou, I've known that song for years. Keep on Chugling, I remember hearing that a few times. And a couple of these other songs, Bootleg, Graveyard Train, as I heard them, I said, oh yeah, I've heard that song before. But there's not, there's not a whole lot of, they're all pretty much, pretty much the same. They're John Fogerty doing some pretty good singing and some pretty good lead guitar playing over a pretty good groove, all in the name of throwing some blues out there. The whole swamp rock Louisiana Bayou thing. I think that was just, that's just kind of an impression that people had that came out of this. I don't hear this as anything more than just some get down dirty blues rock. Am I missing something, Bob, or is that pretty much on the money?
I think you're partially on the money. Now the next thing I'm going to say is supposition on my part, because okay. I don't know this for certain, but I'm left with the impression that Fogerty actually had a love affair with the blues and the mystique, of the Deep South. And because you'll notice he covered a lot of old blues artists in Creedence. And at one point in the 90s, right before he revitalized his career, he went on a trip down south, and he went specifically to visit the gravesite of Robert Johnson, who's considered the king of the Delta blues. And Fogerty says that while he was there, he had an epiphany, and that for a long time, he refused to perform his old Creedence music. And it was out of bitterness. It was out of the thing about losing the publishing rights and all of that. So he just refused to do it. And, Robert Johnson had, and some of those old blues artists, those guys got so ripped off. The people have made a fortune off of their music, and they got pennies for it. So Fogerty says that while he was visiting the gravesite of Robert Johnson, he had this epiphany that it didn't matter who actually owned the rights to the music. It was still Robert Johnson's music because he created it. And so Fogerty said he suddenly had this epiphany, and that led him to start performing his old music again. Also, he met some people down there who were like blues preservationists, and he wound up funding, providing tombstones and things like that for the grave sites of a lot of these old, blues musicians so I think he has a real appreciation for that genre. Even though he's a native California boy. I'm
not denying that. There is no denying that. There is no denying that, because that's what this is. I mean, if get rid of all the of all the things that you've heard about Creedence Clearwater Revival and the impressions you formed just because of what's gotten out there in the culture and everything about Creedence Clearwater Revival. Get rid of all this, and I kind of had an advantage to be able to do this because I've never really listened to this stuff much. and now I'm listening to it with 55 years retrospective, and coming into it with a fairly fresh state of mind. And yeah, that's what it is. I'm not saying that it's like, yeah, I mean, he wasn't a Southern boy, he wasn't a guy in Louisiana, but and he wasn't an old black guy from from the projects or anything, but the man definitely had an appreciation of the blues, and he wrapped himself up in it, and he assimilated it, and he does a very good job with it. He does it very, 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 very well, and that's something that's always escaped the to me, from what I know, that's something that's always pretty much escaped the public consciousness of Creedence Clearwater Revival. Is that basically right at the heart of this? It's just another take on the blues.
Because what Creedence is known for is that incredible string of hit singles. That just dominated, particularly AM radio, that just dominated years. So so if you think about Who Will Stop the Rain, and wow. And you don't have that deep blues type perspective, because those were more rock pop type stuff that was very radio.
And I don't know what the next few albums are going to sound like, but I'm just saying this is an album, and also the debut too.
Right.
This is just, to me, this is just a little more refined version of the debut.
Right.
I don't see a whole lot of difference, except just except Fogerty got better of it. Fogerty took a little tighter control of it, and learned a few things after recording the first album, and this is just a refined version of the debut. Right. I don't know. As we go further along, I'll see if that changes or if that stays the same or not. But just listening to this and the debut, these are just straight out blues albums. They're forget the political messaging, forget of the later years, forget everything that you've formed an impression of Creedence Clearwater Revival. Just look at this with a clean slate, and that's what this is. It's just a straight out blues rock album, with just a tight little groove, I mean, there aren't verses and choruses and bridges and things like that. It's just a tight little groove, and Fogerty just floats above this groove with his singing and his guitar playing. Right.
I would concur with that. Yes.
Yeah.
And Fogerty too, he was blessed with a voice that was made for the blues. And
And
I think he maybe realized that the first I read where he said that he would try writing traditional sort of love songs. That didn't work, but with his voice in the blues, I think it was much more suited for it. And being a huge fan of the blues, he said, I'm gonna mine that. And there's nothing wrong with working in what inspired you. I mean, Fogerty was part of that movement. It was sort of a not rediscovery of American-based blues, because they were sure doing it on the other side of the pond with Yardbirds and John Mayall and all that. So in one sense, Fogerty and Creedence, they were mining a musical tradition of their homeland. And as far as the Swamp Thing, I think that probably some headline writer for one of the rock magazines came up with that.
That's why I just came out of the impression. It just came out of the title of that song and of this this album.
And I think it fits in with his love of the music of the Delta blues and all that, and a little bit of mysticism and voodooism and all, and the different musical categories down in Louisiana. It goes from New Orleans jazz, ragtime to Zydeco. But there's none of that. This is, yeah, to knock another swing on the nail here. Yeah, it's straight out American blues.
Yeah. This is, yeah. You mentioned, you mentioned the, the Clapton, and those folks on the other side of the pond, doing their blues. This is a different type. This is just a much tighter, much groovier version of the blues, where Clapton and Jimmy Page and all them who were doing that over on the other side of the ocean. It was more open and spread out and more improvisational, where this is just really tight and really just dump into that groove and don't get out of that groove. And just stay there, and it's glorious. I gotta tell you, I made a road trip. I made a road trip this week, and I put this on and the debut on in my car, listened to it on the drive, and this is fantastic car driving music.
I'm really surprised, Scott. I didn't think this would be something that would enamor you.
No, well, yeah, it's I could say it's a groove, man. You fall into that groove, and it just sucks you in. It sucks you in. It's like I don't go around seeking out that groove very often, but once I get a little taste of that groove, it sucks me in, and I'm willing to stay there for quite a while.
I like,
and like I say, I mean, there's nothing intellectual about it. There's nothing deep thought. There's no, there's no wow factor here as far as virtuoso music playing or anything like that, or any kind of music theory or nice little tricks that they pull off. It's just a great little groove. It's just a great little groove that you sit in and you just let it surround you, and you just kind of crawl in and let it take you. Let it take you where it wants to take you.
And most of the songs on Bayou Country are actually, I think, kind of primitive. It's it's the groove that grabs you. Proud Mary,
that's what it's all about. Yeah.
It's the groove, and and that's one thing I like. I like Creedence enough that even their weaker songs to me are still good. And if I'm listening to a Creedence album, especially these days when you can just skip to the next one, I just let it go. Even the weaker songs I can listen to. So I can do an entire album without skipping anything.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. That's what makes this an album, and people don't think of Creedence as an album band, because of all the hit singles that they had, especially coming up over the course of the next couple of years after this one. But this is a whole piece right here. This album is a whole piece. It's an album. It's not just a collection of songs. It's an album. There's a definite it's a cohesive piece, from start to finish, and everything works with everything else. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the next one, Green River. And,
I think you're gonna like it.
And we'll do that. We'll do that 3 or 4 weeks. I think next week we're going to get back to the band and go visit the band's second album. And I'm at the band the same place I was with Creedence. I've never done a dive into the band, so I'm in the same place with them. So I'm looking forward to seeing where they went from after Music from Big Pink, which we talked about.
You're getting into my world now, Scott.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. Coming up next week on the Roundtable will be the band's second album, called The Band. We have a couple of reviews coming up on Friday. I think this Friday will be, help me out, Bob. What did you record that we have scheduled for this? For Jethro Tull.
Have we done Tull yet? Or
Jethro Tull, right? That's this Friday coming up, and then the following Friday will be my 40th anniversary look at The Blue Mask by Lou Reed. And we're going to get out of here before Bob hurts himself.
Going off subject, folks, do not get a German Shepherd if you want to keep dog toys. This thing destroys every dog toy I get her.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and thanks for watching Bob and Lacey put on a show for us.
He's hard to ignore. Sorry. All right.
We'll talk to you soon. So long.
All right. Take care.
Later.